everyone. My name is Shireen DeLong. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Wellbeing Program Coordinator at the Center for the Advancement of Wellbeing here at Mason. A lot of my work revolves around creating spaces for people of color to find unique ways to promote their well-being. And when I'm not at work, I'm working on my PhD in higher education and an emphasis on social justice and diversity. I'm also Indian American, I'm a Christian, and my husband is one of the campus ministers here at Mason. Shout out to Matthew. Hey, Matthew. Uh, anyway, getting back to our event tonight, it feels like such an understatement to say that this past year has been wild. Between the pandemic, the increased awareness of police brutality, the rise of anti-Asian racism and violence, and so many other challenges, this year has been difficult for our well-being. For you who are college students, you've had to endure all of this while taking classes online, learning how to interact with friends while maintaining everyone's safety, and so much more. I've heard from many of you that you're struggling with living at home, living with inconsiderate roommates, or living alone. Our mental health has suffered. Our physical well-being has been threatened. And our go-to supports may not be as readily available as they once were. And so the weight of this year really cannot be diminished. With that said, I want to be clear that despite these significant challenges, it is possible not only to survive, but to thrive. Research shows that one of the greatest predictors of student thriving, especially for students of color, is spirituality. Researchers don't limit spirituality to a particular religion or faith system, but include all forms of connecting to something greater than yourself, something that gives you meaning and purpose. Spirituality has been instrumental in sustaining many of us during these harsh times. And this evening, we get a chance to hear from some of our own about what this looks like. So for the events tonight, we'll have panelists from different faiths sharing about the impact of COVID on their faith and the impact of their faith during times of COVID. We also have with us my colleague and friend, Amal Strayhorn, who will share a few words. And after that, we'll have some Q&A from the audience for our panelists. And finally, we'll welcome all students to join a roundtable conversation over Zoom. This will be a time for students to share your experiences of faith during the pandemic and hear from one another about an hour about our different faiths and how our faiths have sustained us during this time. So roundtables will start about 7, and the link will be shared in the comments throughout the event. So before we begin, I want to acknowledge that historically, religious groups have endured much suffering and conflict from and with each other. We acknowledge this painful reality while also seeking unity, particularly here at Mason. So tonight is not a night for debates or doctrine. It's not a night for conflict or conversion. Instead, it's just a conversation among friends about our shared experience during a global pandemic and how our respective faiths have been a support to us during this time. So let's get started. I would like to begin by introducing our first panelist. First up is James Smith. James is a senior and represents the Catholic Campus Ministry here at Mason. He identifies as Roman Catholic. James, will you share with us about your faith during COVID?
Sure. First, thank you so much. It's great to be with all of you. My name is James Smith, and I am actually an alumni from Mason. I transferred out, but for a long time, I was a member of the campus ministry, the Catholic campus ministry here at George Mason. So Mason is very much close to my heart, so it's great to be here. I think during this pandemic, especially, it was definitely hard for, besides myself, for people of all faiths, just because, first of all, we had a lockdown. So for a long time, I think it was about two or 3 months, I couldn't even attend Sunday Mass. So I couldn't even go to church or go to church daily for Mass. I was always open to pray. The churches were open for personal prayer, but it was very difficult to really stay steadfast to my faith when I couldn't go to church on Sunday. And also the social aspect of that, I couldn't see all of my college friends who were here. I think for me, something interesting that came out of the pandemic was that COVID really made me reflect on the word faith as a whole. asking myself, will I still hold true to my Catholic faith? Will I still believe in Jesus, even when I can't physically be near him or in the church? And as I reflected more on that, reading through the scripture, I just thought mainly about the early Christians and how it was difficult for them as people of faith to hold on to their faith, but also their strength during that time, even when, they were being persecuted while they had to do things in secret. And the grace that came out of that was that it let me look at this pandemic in a whole new light. Even though it was certainly difficult with COVID, and even though COVID, being such a terrible thing, I was able to kind of see the silver linings in a few situations. My faith really opened my eyes to the beauty of, personal prayer. So I was really able to grow in my own prayer time. The joy that came from my prayer also helped nourish many friendships. It gave me a sense of joy, and that sense of joy was something that I want to share with my friends, and many friends who were in similar situations want to share back with me. So there was definitely it was interesting that there was a communal aspect for something that was for, a disease that was aimed at, kind of separating community. And that's mainly my experience with COVID and my faith. And thank you so much for letting me share.
Thanks, James. I really appreciated that aspect of community. Like, that's really profound to think that COVID has really separated community, but you were able to see an increase in community, an increase in sense of joy. And the community you described was not just like reaching out to friends here, but also a historic community because of your faith, like thinking about early Christians and their strength and endurance during times of secrecy as well. I think that's really profound to look at community both historically and today. So thanks for sharing that. Next up, we have Siam Sharif. Siam is representing the Muslim Students Association. He identifies as Muslim. Siam, please share with us about how your faith has helped you manage during the pandemic.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me. I begin in the name of God, the most compassionate and the most merciful. I'd like to thank our host for inviting us and for everyone for joining this great session. Faith for me is what gives me guidance, hope, and purpose. Life is full of times of happiness and times of challenges. But I think what gives me peace and contentment and keeps me strong and guides me throughout life is faith. Practicing faith is a major part of our lives. In Islam, we perform 5 daily prayers. So, we try to perform prayers together. And for many of us, it would mean going to the mosque, attending Islamic classes, volunteering at local charity events, and many activities together. But because of the pandemic, a lot of that has been changed in terms of the format. And we've had to do many things at home and, either virtually for classes and activities, or just at home in terms of prayers. So it has been tough, but we've learned and bridged the technology gap, and also made the best of it. So yeah, I think that's how it has been.
That's great, Siam. Thank you for sharing. I think I liked to hear about the peace and contentment that you shared. And I also thought it was really interesting that you were able to adapt, like you described 5 daily prayers. If it was usually in a mosque, that you adapted to doing things at home. And I think sometimes spirituality and religion can give us like a regular rhythm, I think, to life, and our faith can sustain us just through patterns of every day. And so thank you for sharing that. I appreciated that perspective. Next up, we have Amelia Stork, representing Chabad at GMU. Amelia identifies as Jewish. Amelia, what has your faith meant to you during these times?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here with everyone. So I'm president of Chabad on campus, which is one of the Jewish organizations. And we normally have a Shabbat service every other week. We share with Hillel, so we switch back and forth. And it's been hard personally as a leader for the Jewish community not being able to hold those in person, because Chabad is our rabbi and Rebbitzin, who are great. They cannot be on any electronics after sundown. So on Shabbos, if you're Orthodox, you follow those rules, and part of that is no work, no nothing electric and electronic you can use. So I think that's been really hard for me, not being able to have that time to go spend with people. And I think personally, being Jewish is a huge part of who I am as a person in my family. So sharing that, not being able to share that with my family who's actually in Georgia, because I can't travel back and forth for the holidays, especially during COVID. That's been really tough to find ways to celebrate here. And none of my roommates are Jewish, but for Rosh Hashanah, I was able to do I made my own Rosh Hashanah dinner. So I think finding the joy in sharing your rituals and religion, and a loving and just having people support you and supporting them in that time is a really great positive part of having to be at home and not get to go to shul or services or be with the community you're normally sharing with. So it's definitely been tough, but I think overall it'll definitely be okay in the end. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amelia. I appreciate that you were able to name what has been such a big blow to so many of us, and that we're not able to attend our traditional religious services, as well as events with our families. That is really hard. But I loved hearing about how you made your own, and you were able to share rituals and pieces of religion to your roommates. And it just seems like through the challenge, you were able to see an opportunity to expand. And I love that. So thank you. By way of reminder, everyone, I encourage all participants to sign up for the 7 p.m. roundtable discussion using the link in the comments. You'll be able to have more personal conversations with one another and learn more about different types of spirituality, which, like I said, is directly connected to your well-being as a student. So check out the comments for the link. Next up, we have Ron Lapitan, a Mason alum representing the Baha'i Club. Ron identifies as Baha'i. And Ron, thanks for coming. Could you tell us how spirituality has impacted you during this pandemic?
Thanks, Shireen. Hi, friends. I'm Ron. I'm from the Baha'i Club. Just for background, the Baha'i faith is a religion whose main teaching is the oneness of humanity, that regardless of race, nation, or religion, we're all one human family living in one world, and we should strive to build a world that lives this way. And we also believe that there's a common truth between all the religions, so we should strive to build unity and friendship between them instead of disunity. To quote a line from the Baha'i writings, "It is not for him to pride himself who loveth his own country, but rather for him who loveth the whole world. The earth is but one country, and mankind its citizens." So, at the beginning of this pandemic, I was thinking a lot about the movie Avengers Endgame. That movie starts after the villain has already won, changed the world, and it starts with this image of a once bustling city now with boarded up shops and empty stadiums and streets. And the heroes spend that movie trying to get back the Infinity Stones that the villain used to change the world so they can change it back to the way it was before. And I was reflecting that the difference between that and real life is that we shouldn't strive to go back to an old world, even if there are a lot of things about that old world that we miss. Because that world wasn't the united world that I as a Baha'i or any of us from any of our beliefs should dream about. In fact, I think this virus without borders, which hurts society the most in the places where it is the most divided, showed all the ways that it wasn't that world. I think that the world is like a human body where all the organs, though diverse, should work together for a common well-being. And it showed that we don't always recognize this interdependence we have. And because of it, our body as a collective is sick. We were sick long before the virus. I think one of the things faith helps to do is to keep in perspective that God uses tests as well as victories to push us towards that better way of being human, because it's when we're hurt that we become the most willing to let go of the way we've always seen things and more willing to imagine a new way for things to be. So not like the Avengers just fighting nostalgically to bring back something the way it was, but actually striving to build something better to replace old ways and old structures. If it's all right, I'd like to end by sharing a line from a letter by the Universal House of Justice, which is the guiding institution of the Baha'i world, written to us at the beginning of quarantine. And it goes like this. However difficult matters are at present, and however close to the limits of their endurance certain sections of societies are brought, humanity will ultimately emerge on the other side with a greater insight and with a deeper appreciation of its inherent oneness and interdependence. Thank you.
Ron, that is powerful. Thank you for sharing. I think it's so true that we can't go back to the world that we had before the pandemic. I think you're right that the virus has shown us the faults in our societies, and it's so important for us to work together for common well-being. I think that just a quote or something that you said really stood out. We were sick long before the virus. That is profound, and I appreciate your insights there. Our last panelist is James Calderon. James is a grad student at Mason, represents the Latter-day Saints Student Association. James identifies with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Welcome, James. Tell us about your faith during times of COVID.
Hi, yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm very happy to be here with the rest of the panelists. Everyone's done a great job. And yeah, my situation during COVID was very interesting because I had, and it has to do a lot with faith. So one of the big things in our faith is that we do believe in connecting with our ancestry. And I'm half Paraguayan, so in order to really do the research to find out about my family tree from my Paraguayan side, I decided to go to Paraguay for spring break last semester. Now, if you guys remember, spring break was when COVID really hit and they decided to close the university. First, they started by extending spring break by a week. And I thought to myself, I'm having I was having a good time in Paraguay, but more importantly, I was connecting a lot with my home country, with my mother's country, and that meant a lot to me. And I had the decision if when the news came from Mason that they would extend spring break by 1 week, I had the option of either taking a flight out, and I would have only spent one week with my family, or I could extend it for another week and push my luck. So I prayed to God about that, and the answer that I got in what I should do in this certain time was actually to try to extend my flight by 1 week. The thing with extending my flight with 1 week meant, though, is that that's when Panama went into full quarantine. And the reason this is important is because all connecting flights go through Panama. So my flight kept on getting canceled. And so at first it was a little bit worrying that I was kind of stuck in a different country. But then I remembered what a lot of the things in our faith, that when we get these situations where we don't really know what to do or where to go, to really pray with sincerity, and we believe that Heavenly Father is going to give you the answer. And I received my answer because even though there were a lot of difficulties from staying in Paraguay, being in a country outside the United States during the pandemic, the lockdown I experienced was very different than the one that people had over here. I'm very grateful for that experience, for getting quote unquote stuck in Paraguay. To me, I don't feel that I was stuck as much as in this place that God wanted me to be at the right time. I was also worried about some classes because Obviously, I didn't have all my materials over there in Paraguay with me. I had only brought like about a week's worth of study materials, but things worked out. There were scary moments. I had the moments where I thought that this whole being in another country kind of like messed up sleep pattern now. It's because of the seasons over. Since it's the southern hemisphere, it was getting darker while I wanted it to get lighter. Like my body was getting used to like now that there's more light during the day. But instead, like I kind of had 2 winters at the same time. So that was a little bit depressing that I didn't get like past a 12-hour day or something. Either way, I spent a lot of time in the dark, more time in the dark in 2020 than in the light, just due to being in the hemispheres at the wrong time. But it reminded me how sacred family was, how sacred it is to connect, not just with those in our immediate family, but those in our extended family, and to kind of go off of what Ron said, really those that are part of our human family. I am very thankful for being able to be in South America, to be in Paraguay, while I was able to be with people from a different background, in a very different upbringing, in a very different situation. I thank God for giving me that. Actually, I thank him a lot because it put a lot of things in perspective. It made me think of how do I want to go on with my life? Where do I want to take my faith, and what can my faith do for someone else? So those are, I got a lot of answers out of COVID, a lot of struggles, but through struggles we get answers. And that's about my COVID experience there, that searching for answers, and if you know how to look, you'll get them. And I'm not going to say it's an easy experience, but it was a worthwhile one.
Thanks, James. Thanks for sharing. I loved your picture of getting stuck, but then that's reframed into finding freedom, really, and the sacredness of family. You were able to connect with extended family, and then I loved how you said how we connect with those that are part of our human family. That's so profound. Well, our panelists have done a great job. We've sort of breezed through several people's stories. These are the short versions. I'm sure there's longer versions for each of them. But I hope that you were able to get a picture of how spirituality can sustain somebody during hard times. We heard of connections to family. We heard of connections to non-family through sharing of rituals and religion. We heard about just different ways to connect with history as well, and reframing tragedy, reframing hardship. Spirituality and connecting to something greater than ourselves really is powerful. And so thank you to all the students and the alums who were panelists this evening for sharing their stories with us tonight. I really do hope it gives a picture of how spirituality has the power to ground us and steady us through uncertain times like COVID. And before we enter into our time of question and answers, I wanted to introduce the Director of the Coalition Building and Diversity Education Department, Hamal Strayhorn. Welcome, Hamal. We'd love to hear your perspective on the role of interfaith dialogue, the university, whatever else is on your mind this evening. Welcome, brother. Muted. Hey, Hamal, I think you're muted.
I'm talking and thought everyone could hear me, but I'm glad to be here tonight. And Sharina, you are a great human being, and I'm glad that we have the opportunity to share this space tonight. And I'm glad I had the opportunity to share this space with everyone that was a part of this panel. This panel is a very powerful panel to talk about interfaith work and how faith and spirituality has carried us. My name is Hamal Strayhorn, and as Serene was saying, I am the Director for Coalition Building and Diversity Education here on campus. A little bit about me is that I'm also, my faith background, which I identify with, is Christian. I am a minister as well in the Christian faith. One thing that this pandemic has done for me is push me towards working on my doctorate, and I'm working on my THD, my doctorate in theology and Christian counseling. And one thing that has really helped me through this pandemic, and I've also had worked with other people to help them through this pandemic, is one of the words of C.S. Lewis. And C.S. Lewis writes, "Relying on God has to begin all over again every day, as if nothing had been done or yet been done." And COVID really has really called us to this particular passage on an everyday basis, is relying on God every day as if nothing has been done. In talking about faith, faith is important, is an important element for all human life. Faith is what helps us get through the tough times. Faith keeps us resilient. Faith gives us that bounce back when we feel like we can't make it. And COVID has made it feel like sometimes that we can't be resilient, but our faith gives us that bounce back and allows us to come back and bounce back and be what we need to be. It encourages critical thinking and thoughtful reflection. Faith is a part of identity. Even though it's invisible, it is just as much as our identity as our physical or seen identities. Some things that our university has done during this time is really to support students through COVID, has been offering some telehealth and telehealth through CAPS to help students process through some of the some of the things that need to help people's well-being and mental well-being. We've offered up safe spaces online for students to tune into, because not only have we faced COVID, we faced xenophobia, racism, we faced insurrection, and so these are some of the things that our students have been going through, and our university has jumped on to address that, even our office. And I think, those are some of the things, as my office and as the university, we are looking forward to doing some more work in interfaith work, building a collective and collaborative efforts with all faiths on campus. I think one thing that we have to work on and remember is that this is not something that can be done individually. We have to work together. Regardless of our faith backgrounds, regardless of our differences. We may see the world differently. We may view our Creator very differently. And we may approach the world and have a different worldview, but we work collectively together to ensure that all of us are getting what we need and moving through life healthy, happy, and having equity. So thank you for letting me speak with you all tonight. I would love to have conversations with each and every one of you. As I said, my background is ministry, but I've also led a faith and spirituality center before coming to George Mason. So the work we know is never done. So I look forward to speaking with you all in the future. Thanks.
Thanks, Amal. Man, I feel like I need a sticker or something that says faith keeps us resilient. I think that's so true. And I really appreciated your word on we need to work together regardless of our faith backgrounds and differences. That's great. Thank you. As our panelists come back on screen, I'd like to remind everyone to sign up for the roundtable activity that's happening after this panel. That'll be a space for you to share about your experiences with faith during pandemic life. That starts at 7 p.m. The link is in the comments. So at this point, I'd like to open up the time of question and answers. You're welcome to write comments in the comment sections of YouTube or Facebook. We'll try to answer as many as we can. Again, we ask all questions to be respectful of our panelists and their faiths. They will answer as they are able. So let's see here. First question, did your experience of the pandemic change the way you pray? You want to answer that? The pandemic changed the way you pray? James.
Yeah, I'll share real quick. It's not a huge change as much as just an addition for everything that's going on. Anytime I pray, for whatever it may be, starting church or for my own sake, or like to bless a meal, I always end it asking God to give comfort to those in need of it. Because and I phrase it that way, to give comfort to them, because I don't know necessarily what it is that this other person needs, but I know that they do need something, and I know that God can help them with that. So that's just something that with everything that's been going on, I decided to add that to my prayer to for comfort for others.
Thanks, James. Anyone else want to answer?
Yeah, sure. First off, hi, John Moore. John Moore is one of the campus ministers here at CCM, so it's great to see him. I think something that I learned in my prayer personally was more of how to listen and not be the one talking the entire time. I think something that I can often drift to is, trying to lead the conversation when the conversation prayer can be two ways. And with COVID and the social distancing that we experience, we're already experiencing some level of silence. And again, it's kind of seeing the silver lining in that and taking advantage of that gift, that actual gift of silence, and incorporating it into prayer. So
it's powerful, James. Sia?
Yeah, I think especially at the beginning of the pandemic, when we were in the lockdown and we're just home alone or not around our usual community, it gave us the ability to just take some time alone and reflect and think about things. And I believe that made me personally more sincere and grow stronger in my trust and faith. As I continue to pray, especially the month of Ramadan, which usually was at the mosques, and it'd be a very big social gathering, and it'd be a very nice time, and it would feel just very nice to be around everyone. I didn't feel the same feeling, but I felt a different feeling, which I got to enjoy and got to learn from. So just being alone or being at home gave us the ability to reflect and be more sincere in our prayers and get closer to God.
Thanks, Siam. Let's see, what is our next question? Our next question is, what aspect of your faith have you most grieved the loss of during the pandemic, and how have you dealt with that? We have a lot of questions coming in, so we're going to limit our answers to maybe 2 participants, the first 2 who would like to answer. What aspect of your faith have you most grieved the loss of?
Hi. So I think definitely that sense of community and sharing the experience together. And I think probably all of us relate to that. And everyone who also doesn't necessarily relate to a religion also feels that their sense of community is lost during this as well. And I think especially on like our really big holidays where praying in a space together or sharing a meal together, all those things like aren't possible right now. And I would say that's the biggest loss currently for me.
That's helpful, Amelia. I'm sure that resonates with lots of our panelists. I see a lot of shaking heads. Anyone else want to add to that? If not, we'll move to the next question. How has the relationship between community and faith changed in the last year? How do you think this relationship will look when things go back to, quote, normal? Interesting question. We've already heard a little bit about community. Yeah, James. You're muted.
Sorry, I lost the page for a second. I think something that was interesting is that community has actually, I think, grown some during the pandemic. Kind of like how I mentioned earlier, the desire to be with people has grown. even though we can't be with each other. But I think that just kind of shows the strength of friendship, but also, the communities that we have here, whether it's CCM or, one of my fellow panelists here. So it's really beautiful to see the desire for all of us to still be with each other, even when we can't necessarily always be around. So.
Mm-hmm. Great response, James. Anyone else? How has community changed? What do you think it'll look like when we go back to post-COVID life? Yeah, Amelia.
I definitely think personally, I'll cherish and make that time more important when that's possible again. Like, I think in the past, I might have been able to like, oh, like I can go to Shabbos next week with these people, or like, oh, next week I can like, do this or do that. And now it's like, oh, I maybe took it for granted. So I think afterwards it'll have more importance than maybe it did before because of how it was taken away so suddenly.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Thank you. Our next question is, what sort of things or practices did you find helpful to keep yourself spiritually motivated when there was a general feeling of laziness at the beginning of the pandemic? Getting real here. What are things you did to stay spiritually motivated?
Can I answer? Or James, go first.
Oh, sorry, Ron. Yeah, it's something really practical that I found that really helped, because it definitely was really hard in the beginning to stay spiritually motivated. It's just reading, biographies and stories about the lives of really, in my case, prominent Catholics. Every one of the people I admire very much is the late Pope John Paul II, who suffered a lot in his life, wasn't able to participate a lot towards the end when he was struggling from Parkinson's. He survived an assassination attempt, but that didn't stop him from pursuing his faith. And that's a really extreme example, but sometimes it's those really extreme examples that get you like really pumped and psyched, and can really help you just persevere and trust in those situations when you might not necessarily be feeling the vibe at that moment. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful. Ron, what were you going to say?
Oh, thanks. For me, this question goes back to the prayer question. I have this friend who says that sometimes joy is heavy because when it's a time where the right thing to do is to grieve or feel angry about something, feeling joyful at the same time as that is in itself an act of resilience. So for me, prayer can be that. So Baha'is, when we get together and pray, a common thing we do is we sing songs. And one of the coolest things I learned at the beginning of the pandemic is that even in a virtual room, the song still works, So I think that was a really good thing to know when we had moments like George Floyd or, last week, the shooting in Atlanta, which was very hard for me and my family because as Asian looking people, we wonder what's going to happen to us when we walk outside. In those moments, you might not be able to go to someone's house, but you can still get together and sing to each other,
That's powerful, Ron. Thank you for sharing that. Our next question is, how can the university help you practice your faith during these times? Have you found resources at Mason that have helped you? Amelia.
I know I've talked a lot, so feel free, everyone else, to jump in. I've actually been lucky enough to meet with a lot of faculty, administration this past semester and this semester to discuss getting religious holidays in the calendar and have that to be something that all faiths can be a part of. So our most important religious holidays can be marked down and really recommended that exams don't be put on those days, student performances or events that are for students, so that we can really take that time to celebrate our own religious holidays and not have it be a choice between going to something that you really want to see, or in my case, as a dance major, participating in a performance that has been put on like the same day as a holiday, which has happened this semester. So, and other times since I've been at Mason. And every administrator and staff member has always been really helpful in this process. They're all very excited and willing to make changes, which is really great. So I'm excited for when that happens. So luckily, we've been doing that right now, and that will hopefully be fruitful for next year.
Absolutely. That's a great reminder that your voices are important, that the university is learning and growing, and so it's important that you speak up and share your needs here. So any other responses? All right, next question. How were your beliefs in your religions changed because of COVID, if any? Great question. This will be our last question for the evening. How were your beliefs in your religions changed because of COVID?
Yeah, I guess I got a quick answer for that. I'll try to make it quick. It strengthened my faith a lot, mainly in seeing where God guides me. And this was something I was thinking about a lot the other day, that I remember, so I'm a convert to the church, and before this, like, I had basically another life. And I remember how a lot of things, especially something as big as being stuck in a different country, would have completely thrown me off. It would have raised my anxiety through the roof, and it would be something that I couldn't really contain. Like I said, I'm a very new convert to the faith, so I still had a lot of things that I was figuring out, right? And the only thing I kind of knew for sure at that time was that I have a feeling that this is where God wants me to be, and I got that answer through seeing that relationship in Paraguay, realizing that God wants us to act not only on Sundays or whenever our Sabbath is, but in all of our lives, and He will guide us and show us how to help others. And for that, I'm very grateful. And it's more of that understanding that God is there to really guide us that has really been cemented in my beliefs, I should say, more than changed.
Thanks for sharing.
Can I answer this one too?
Oh, yes, please.
Sorry, Shireen.
Go ahead.
For me, something that at least my understanding has changed during COVID is trust. I think one thing that's very fundamental to each of our beliefs is how we understand human character and human nature. For Baha'is, it's that humans are born noble in nature. Like, we have this quote in our writings, "Noble I made thee." So when people don't act like that, it's not because like our true nature is to be bad. It's more like we haven't learned to be what we're truly supposed to be, you know? So I guess in this time when a lot of us are kind of like learning this distrust for our environment, like going back to the Atlanta shootings where like my parents and I, we walk around with pepper spray now and a panic button because we don't know what's going to happen. Things like that still have to live alongside our faith in humanity. That what's happening now, this isn't a reflection of how people really are. It's a reflection of we're in a painful process of becoming more of what we're supposed to be, you know? And this painful moment is a very necessary part of that growth, which in the end result will be a good thing.
Thank you, Ron. Yeah, that's very helpful. Any other last thoughts from our panelists? If not, I guess we will wrap up this portion of the evening. Don't forget, the roundtable discussion is going to happen at 7 in about 15 minutes. The roundtable discussions will happen over Zoom. You can connect with others on matters of faith and spirituality. The link should be in the chat as we prepare to transition to our small group discussions. I'd just like to thank all of our panelists for showing up, for sharing their hearts, thank you to each of you for representing your campus ministries and for helping us understand what faith can look like during difficult times. Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives. I hope it was beneficial for everybody listening. Again, join the roundtable discussion over Zoom. The link is in the chat. Thanks, everyone.